June 4, 1943. Dawn broke not with light, but with thunder. A roar like 1,000 dragons shattered the silence as fire erupted beyond the forest trench. The shockwave hit seconds later, rattling the bones of every man inside. Captain Elias Hart's eyes flew open. In seconds he was up, boots squelching in muddy water. "Get up!" he barked, voice like flint striking stone. "Move, damn it!" Around him, the men of the 6th Infantry Company stumbled awake, grabbing weapons, helmets, packs. They'd survived 6 months of war. 14 remained out of the original 26. Private Kessler was first to his feet. "Captain!" Hart scanned the smoke-choked horizon. "They're coming. Fall back to the second ridge." They ran. Past shattered trees. Past the charred bodies of scouts. Through the ash of yesterday's heroes. Hart knew every step was dangerous, mines, snipers, even betrayal. But they made it. The second line stood like a broken tooth, ragged and half-buried in dirt. Before the war, Hart had lectured on history. A quiet man with a love for dusty books and old poems. He never imagined killing, or watching friends burn. His wife Clara had begged him not to enlist. But Hart believed in duty. Now duty tasted like blood. They reached the second line, a ridge of sandbags and wire. Sergeant Monroe stood waiting, blood soaking his sleeve. "We lost Freeman. Collins too." Hart nodded. "Hold here. No matter the cost." The men dug in. The trenches were shallow, muddy, and crawling with rats. The cold night air stung their lungs. Artillery pounded the earth. Trees fell like dominoes. And the enemy arrived. Gray-clad soldiers. Helmets low. Faces emotionless. They moved with cold calculation, spreading out, preparing for a siege. "Wait," Hart whispered. When they entered the water, he gave the order. Rifles thundered. Machine guns roared. And the river ran red. Bodies floated, tangled in wire. Cries of pain echoed off the hills. Hart could barely hear over the cacophony of war. Yet they held. Barely. They buried the dead in shallow graves. There was no time for names. Only crosses. 9 soldiers remained. Monroe coughed blood. "Captain, we can't hold another wave." Hart looked at the trees. Quiet now. But not for long. He walked the line. Kessler sat in his trench, whispering prayers. The Price brothers loaded bullets into magazines with shaking hands. They had once plowed fields. Now they plowed flesh. Anna, the company medic, worked tirelessly. Bandages stained with red. Her eyes never left the wounded. "Think we'll live?" she asked. "No," Hart said honestly. "But they'll remember us." He spent the night writing in his journal, documenting the names of the fallen, small stories of bravery. He didn't want them to disappear like smoke. He remembered Lancer, who died laughing. He remembered Yuri, who had shared stories of the Russian tundra. And Bell, the boy with a harmonica who never stopped smiling. Dawn brought death. Artillery screamed. Explosions ripped trenches apart. Then came the wave. Hundreds of soldiers, storming like a tide of steel. The 6th Company answered. Gunfire lit the ridge. Grenades flew. Men screamed. Monroe died with a grenade in hand. He leapt from the trench to buy time for Hart. His body vanished in a thunderclap. Kessler was shot through the heart, falling silently. A single gasp, then stillness. Anna dragged a wounded man to safety, then a second shell ended her run. Her face was peaceful, like she'd finally found rest. Only Hart and the Price brothers stood by nightfall. Their fingers were numb. Guns overheated. Their voices hoarse from shouting. The enemy regrouped. Hart pointed to the fuel barrels. "We burn it." The brothers hesitated. "Captain, you go." "We'll do it." Hart shook his head. "My command. My fire." They hugged him. Then ran. Hart lit the ridge as the enemy advanced. Flames consumed the hill. The sky turned black. He stood until the fire claimed him. His last thought was Clara's smile. Weeks later, the army returned. They found the ridge, a charred ruin soaked in blood and glory. Among the ashes, a journal. Hart's. They sent it to Clara. She read his last words by candlelight. "We stood not because we wanted to die, but because others needed time to live. I go now not in fear, but in memory of those I led. I love you. I carry your name into the fire." She wept, then smiled. He had kept his promise. In fire and ashes he had come home. She donated the journal to a museum. Visitors walked past the glass case every day, reading the words of a man who chose honor over life. A small plaque beneath it read, "Captain Elias Hart, defender of the Red Ridge. Hero in flame. Memory in stone. Epilogue the echoes." Years passed. The ridge became a monument. Trees regrew, but the land never forgot. Children played near the old trenches. Tourists took photos beside rusted helmets and twisted wire. An old man, a veteran, touched the stone and whispered, "We were just boys." War stories faded, but legends didn't. And deep in the soil, the echoes of fire and ashes whispered still.